For the next panel, the topic that is on every channel, every headline, and on everyone's mind. Thank you. Thanks. The 2016 presidential election. This panel will focus on climate change and the election, arguably our world's greatest challenge and an issue that is glaringly absent from the discussion. To provide some insight into the topic, we are very fortunate to hear from Jean Karpinski, president of the League of Conservation Voters and a longtime AREDAY alum, in conversation with Pete Maysmith, director of Conservation Colorado. Dr. Dorsey, unfortunately, was unable to make it today. Prior to the League of Conservation Voters, Karpinski served on the LCV Education Fund Board of Directors and the LCV Political Committee. Before LCV, Karpinski worked for over 20 years as the executive director of the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, the national lobbying office for state PIRGs across the country, where he led many national environmental issue campaigns. Before his tenure at U.S. PIRG, he was the field director for People for the American Way and Congress Watch, and executive director of the Colorado PIRG. Karpinski is a graduate of Brown University and Georgetown University Law Center. Pete Maysmith, this is his first time at AREDAY, is executive director of Conservation Colorado, the largest state-based environmental group in Colorado with over 8,000 members and 37 staff. Maysmith led the formation of Conservation Colorado in 2013 by merging two of the state's leading environmental groups. The organization has seen a 7-fold increase in staff and budget since Maysmith became director. Over the course of his 25-year career in advocacy and politics, Maysmith has run state organizations and served on the senior staff of national campaigns, raised millions of dollars, and hired and trained dozens of exceptional staff. And as a side note, if you're interested in learning how to diversify the environmental movement, find Pete during a break because they're doing an excellent job at Conservation Colorado. Thanks.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here. My friend Pete as well. So let me just, by the way, pivot off the last conversation for a second. The vice chair of my board is a former member of Congress who's a Republican. His name is Sherry Bowler. He was the chair of the Science Committee 10 years ago. Was a big champion on climate change, held hearings on climate change as the chair of the committee. The current chair of the Science Committee in Congress is a guy named Maysmith, who's a denier. So it wasn't that long ago that Republicans were proudly talking about climate change. Not all of them, but Sherry had 30 Republicans who were with him on regular votes. And we need that back. And how do we best get there? That's a long conversation. We've got to all do our smart parts and speak smartly about this. But we'll never legislate in Congress without more Republican support. So it's a challenge we all face. Different people do different things. Some use carrots, some use sticks. But we have to get there. So it's a challenge. And hats off to Tremble. I go to Earth Day, Texas, almost every year now. It is by far the single biggest Earth Day conversation in the country, by far, probably in the world. So that just has to mean more of those conversations. So. Thanks, Samuel. I want to agree with all the words that were up there because if it's just energy dependence without saying clean or healthy, then Exxon could say it. If it's just affordable and reliable without clean and healthy, then Peabody could say it. So I think we need work on how we talk about this, but we need to be smart about it. And we're not all going to say the same things, but that's okay. We're going to have a quick conversation between the two of us. And I do want to open this up. We have a half hour, and we'll kind of have back and forth with as many questions as we can get. But the subject matter, as we said, was climate and energy in the elections. And so I'm going to put a good question, an easy softball to my friend Pete. Let him talk for a few minutes. I'll talk for a few minutes, and I'll have plenty of time for back and forth on this. And I was glad to be at the panel that Maggie and Mark were at earlier because it started this conversation as well. So Pete, when it comes to let's start local. When it comes to Colorado, what's at stake on climate, energy, and elections, and how's it playing? And how do you think it will play, and how should it play in the elections here in Colorado?
Sure. Thanks, Gene. And it's great to be here. Thanks very much. I mean, I think what's at stake is leadership. And I think that's something that Colorado has exemplified when it comes to clean energy in the climate space. And it's frankly, thanks to a whole bunch of people in this room, obviously others as well who aren't here. But Colorado has exhibited over the last dozen+ years leadership in that space. And it has happened in a couple different ways, but certainly in large part through elections and the results of those elections, and then what we have been able to do as a state. Now, of course, as we all know, Colorado alone, and none of the states alone, not even the US, of course, can solve the climate crisis. But I think the value of making sure that we win at the state level when it comes to some of these key political races this year is that then states start to lead, right? Because I said that leadership is what's at stake. And once the states start to lead, two things happen. One, it ripples out to other states natural kind of one-upmanship. If somebody has a renewable energy standard of 30%, well, let's see if we can do 40%. If someone's going to cut carbon pollution by 30%, let's cut it further in another state, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think the other thing, and I think we know this through the history of social change in this country, is that change in Washington happens because the states lead and because the states push that. And we can't just, I don't think anyone in this room would expect to just look to Washington to hope that the answers flow from there, right? So often the answers, both the good ideas, the innovative ideas, but then the courage, the vision to see those ideas translated into policy happen at the state level, and they percolate their way up. And here in Colorado, thanks to Mark Udall and a lot of other folks way back in 2004, Maggie, and I'm sorry I wasn't here this morning to hear you and Mark talk, but it's great to see you. Mark Udall's leadership, along with a Republican, Lola Spradley, who was the Speaker of the State House here in Colorado back then. You talk about, Republicans and clean energy, worked together to help bring to the voters and then pass the first renewable energy standard here in Colorado, and the first one actually in the country that the voters had adopted. Now, it was modest. It was 10%, but that's okay. You got to start somewhere, and we did. And then what came after that, electorally, was a wave of candidates who became legislators. I'm talking state senators and state representatives, along with Bill Ritter as the governor. That was in 2006. But a wave of those folks came along where then Colorado took a leadership role in the clean energy and climate space. And we took that initial renewable energy standard and we bumped it to 20%. And then we bumped it to 30%. And we brought in all sorts of great energy efficiency policies and electric vehicle tax credit and other policies as well. Then we looked at the rural electric associations, the AREDAYs, that serve the power to this building and much of rural Colorado, western Colorado and the eastern plains, right? And we said, okay, you've got to come along to the party. And so we brought them along to the renewable energy standard, and now that's at 20%, and all the numbers don't matter that much. Some of you could recite them in your sleep, and others, it's just a sea of numbers. But the point is that the state leadership to have Colorado do more with wind and solar and cut carbon emissions happened because of the support of the legislature, pro-environment legislators. And this year, right now, we don't have that here in Colorado. We have it in the state house with pro-environment leadership, not in the state senate, and we're off by one vote. So literally, there's a state senate seat in Jefferson County, Colorado, right outside of Denver, Key Swing County, actually Key Swing County in the United States, and certainly Key Swing County here in Colorado, that if we flip that one state senate seat, and I'm guessing not more than a handful of people in the room could name the candidates there, and that's okay. If we flip that, then we go back to having a pro-environment state senate here in Colorado. And then we can lead again. Then we can both cut carbon emissions more, do more with renewable energy, and do more with energy efficiency. And it isn't just about here in Colorado. There's examples like that in other states. There's the governor's race in Washington State for the most pro-climate champ governor in America, Jay Inslee. He's got to win. So Washington State, can continue to lead. And there's lots of other examples. So that's what's at stake. It's leadership. It's state leadership to drive this forward. And how is it playing? Look, I know Colorado in terms of the politics of Colorado, so I won't opine on the other states, and Gene can certainly talk about the national environment expertly. But what I'll tell you how it's playing here very, very briefly, this issue plays so well, especially renewables and the link to jobs, right? We know through tons of polling, solar's off the charts, popular. Off the charts popular. Can people still hear me? I'm sorry about that. I talk with my hands and I knock my mic off. Off the charts popular, and wind is the second most popular form of energy, way more than any fossil fuel. And then the jobs associated with that make it a political winner. So it plays well, and we've got to win. And Gene, I would love to turn the question to you, looking outside of Colorado and national in scope. What's at stake and how's it playing?
That's good. And again, Colorado is one of those key places. There are many other states. Bottom up, start. That's going to eventually get us more progress in Washington. So thanks for all that stuff. So in terms of what's at stake, so the last 9 months nationally on climate change are by far the most successful we've ever seen in this country and maybe in the world. So Clean Power Plan was finalized last August. The Keystone Pipeline was rejected last November. The Paris Agreement happened in mid-December. A week after that, the solar and the wind energy tax credits were extended for 5 years in D.C. In January, Secretary Jewell put a moratorium on coal leasing. We then had rules on methane now, and the president took drilling out of the Atlantic off the table. We're still working, Margie, to get the Arctic off the table, but an incredible amount of progress in the last 9 months. Not enough to solve the climate crisis, we know that, but incredible progress that most of this country's ever made. And we're starting to bend the curve. And we brought China and India to the table because we're making serious progress. That's all good. All of that and more is at stake in November. And the conversation is framed at that level, both in terms of the White House, and I'll get back to that in a second with a little particulars, but this contrast can't be sharper. And in terms of the United States Senate in particular, where there's a potential to change the balance of power and create what we call a pro-environment Senate, led by a guy named Chuck Schumer. We keep score. We have a scorecard. Mr. Tipton, by the way, here in Colorado has a lifetime score of what, Pete?
8.
8. And there's a woman named Gail Shorts who wants to take his job. What's her score?
When Gail was in the state legislature, 97% lifetime score in ours.
So that's just a little. So as a little aside, if you want to help her campaign, go to Give Green and give her some money. I didn't say that. And then nationally, Chuck Schumer, who could be the Senate Majority Leader, 91% lifetime score. Mitch McConnell, the current senator, 7% lifetime score. So in the Senate, stark contrast, your senator is up, 87% lifetime score. Michael Bennett's been a champion on clean energy, on land and water conservation fund, on preserving special places, one of the half a dozen or so key Senate races. The challenge, though, is this issue we know is not the first thing that people are talking about, whether you're Democrat or Republican. In fact, I want to show a couple data points. So there's an annual Gallup poll that ranks a number of issues and how they show up. And when you ask people about healthcare, the economy, crime, blah, 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 climate change is almost always towards the bottom, if you can read that. It's just an annual Gallup poll, and climate change just is not high on the priority list. Not surprising. The economy is, obviously, and that's why, as Pete said, when you talk about clean energy, we heard this the last panel, when you're talking about solving the climate crisis, talk about creating the new jobs of the future. Talk about the clean energy future. So there's been some change and an uptick, but here's the one piece of good news. That's just a challenge we face. People care about it, but it's not high. It's not on the short list. The other data point. This is a chart. The most recent poll was in March of this year. This is a trend that started back in November of 2008 at the far left, going now to March of 2016. The blue lines are Democrats who think it should be a very high priority, and that number is higher than it's ever been. The black number in the middle is independents. Again, that number is higher than it's ever been, saying that this should be a high priority. The sad part of this is the Republican number, which is the bottom one. It's actually lower than it was back in 2008. Overall takeaway, though, is global warming, and this is, again, framed as global warming, which is a buzzword that really doesn't react well with Republicans, we know that. But a big uptick for Democrats, big uptick for independents. Republicans, not so. And we can talk a little more about that in back and forth. You heard some about that earlier. But there is a trend here that's kind of, I mean, it's hard not to be when you look around the country and you see the forest fires here in Colorado and the droughts in California and the flash floods and the heat waves and the impacts of asthma, increased asthma attacks. I mean, people are seeing it. It's not just coming in the future. It's now. And we've seen President Obama, and hats off for all those things I mentioned. They all happened, almost all of them, but the tax credits, because he just used his own authority, the Clean Air Act and other acts, leaning into saying this is a problem now, and it's real. So he's done a lot. He's made a lot of progress. Not nearly enough, he says it all the time, but that's what's at stake here. And again, putting on my political hat for a second, at the presidential level, the good news, I think, is that this issue could be more discussed than it's ever been. In the Democratic primary, you had O'Malley and Sanders and Clinton kind of all competing to who can be more green. In fact, even as they're fighting about the platform, Bernie's trying to make the platform green and just make it sharper on the climate change issue. That's a powerful statement. There's more debate in the Democratic primary than before. When you got to the general election in the last two cycles, McCain actually at the time was a decent environmental leader. He had a climate change bill, cap and trade bill. He actually got this. There wasn't really a debate in the general election. When you got to 2012, There was a contrast between Obama and Romney, but Obama, frankly, didn't want to talk about it. He talked about other things. Romney didn't talk about it. It just wasn't talked about at all. There's going to be a lot to talk about in this election, given the candidates. But I'm increasingly confident in watching Clinton. Again, hats up. I mean, full disclosure, we got in for Clinton real early, more than ever before. Endorsed her back in November when it was controversial at the time. We caught a little flack for it, but it was the right thing to do from our perspective. But we're hopeful, at least, that there'll be more conversation about this issue than there's ever been before. You see it in some of those Senate races. I think we'll see it in the presidential. And so if the candidates we support win, it will give them more of a mandate, both here in the state and nationally, to just kind of move forward, lean into this, and make more of the progress that we need. I'm going to end by trying to show we spent more money in the primary than we thought to try to help boost Secretary Clinton. And I want to show one ad that we after we endorsed her back in November. We put this ad out, I think, in late December and ran it on. Actually, it's a Facebook ad, so you'd see some big letters targeting specific audience that we knew this would work with, particularly young people. Is the ad queued up to run there? Let's see if we can get that to go. 30-second ad.
With the global warming and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
One candidate has experience negotiating with other countries to reduce climate change.
Who believes in global warming?
And her clean energy plan will improve the health of all of us.
Who believes in global warming? Raise your hand. Nobody?
Mr. Trump, I do.
We're not going to keep silent when they say climate change isn't real, so we're going to fight and we're going to win.
So this guy literally runs around the country. We caught him. This was a town hall meeting back in New Hampshire in the fall, where one of our folks asked a question. The volunteers asking questions of the candidates. It's a good thing to do. He says, and he tried to call her out. This is a hoax. Who believes it? No one believes it because it's his town hall with his believers. We're not going to convince all those folks. That's okay. But we needed to get a significant amount of the public to care about this more than do now. And for this election, I'd say two groups in particular are critically important to whether Clinton wins and these Senate candidates win. One of those is young people. And you look at the polling data, the younger you are, the more you care about climate change. So that's in our favor, but our candidates need to lean into it. The other group that's critically important, and there are others, but I'd say this as well, is Latinos. When you look at the polling data of whites, African American, Asian Americans, and Latinos, when you ask who cares more about climate change, Latinos. Pete has a great project here in Colorado. Latinos care more about climate change, global warming, than any of those other groups for a lot of different reasons. So lean into this issue with young people and Latinos. It's a powerful issue. It's a powerful motivator. And if we do our jobs well here in Colorado and nationally, we actually can continue to make progress, build on what we've done, and go further. So I'm just going to stop. We got plenty of time to just conversation, questions, suggestions, not long speeches, because we want to let a lot of people jump in. But we want to give people a chance to make a quick comment or ask a quick question. Going first to the, that was our moderator to be.
Off on the right next.
Thank you both. Thank you both, by the way. So yes, in November, the League of Conservation Voters did endorse Hillary Clinton for president. Looking at her LCV scorecard, we see that she was very interested in addressing climate change, thankfully. However, she had voted for offshore drilling multiple times, missed voting on nearly 40% of environment-related legislation between 2007 and 2008. And PolitiFact rates her supporting fracking as mostly true. Recently, though, she has come out strong against offshore drilling. As we look toward a possible Hillary Clinton presidency, could you comment on what LCV and LCV affiliates will demand of President Clinton to help her continue to evolve into a stronger advocate for climate action?
Sure. By the way, Pete's on our National Political Committee, so he was in the conversation where we interviewed Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, and Hillary Clinton back last fall. And our decision was not only was she very strong on the issues, not everything, totally agree with that, but also was the most prepared to get to that, walk into the Oval Office on day one and get the job done, given all the experience she's had, and the most equipped to make sure she had the resources and the strategy to defeat the Republican nominees for all those reasons. But she's not perfect. I think it's our job, all of us here, to make sure we keep pushing her. She actually has gotten stronger, I'd say in the last 9 months. I give Bernie some of the credit for that. I think she's more just paid more attention to it, speaking her mind on it. You're right, she's come out strongly against drilling. That wasn't true a few years ago. She's gotten much tougher on what she says about fracking. She's not for a ban on fracking, but in terms of the regulatory approach like you have here in Colorado, she's got that. But I think there's still some room to grow. I'm also very excited about the chair of her campaign is a guy named John Podesta, longtime friend of ours. formerly on our board and just a real champ on this stuff, and he gets this stuff. He lives and breathes it, and so he knows what it takes to get the job done. Because he went into the Obama administration back in 2013, and for the 1 year he was there, he helped kind of move that administration to decide they're going to say, we're not going to wait for Congress, we're just going to start moving. So John being there helps, but just as more importantly, she's gotten better. She knows that leaning into this issue is actually a winning strategy, and so we're going to see more of that. Thanks.
There's one there. And then we'll
Go that side.
Yeah, so you mentioned that with Latino voters that there's kind of some movement with like what you're talking about. I'm really curious though and I'm somewhat aware of what Conservation Colorado has done, but I'm really curious what what kind of plan of action you have or see going forward, given the fact that that's something that I think that this movement has clearly struggled with, especially when I look out at the makeup of this room, and kind of failing to really engage more. I mean, there are millennials here, obviously, but especially people who are minorities.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're 100% right, and I think it is one of the biggest challenges, if not the single biggest challenge of the environmental movement, is how we diversify this movement in a way that is authentic and effective and helps us build political power ultimately to achieve our objectives, which are to win and protect the environment, right? And I don't think we can do that if we don't do a much better job of reaching out to folks that historically are with us. Again, Gene showed polling data and talked about it. I've got lots of polling data. A lot of people in this room probably have polling data on support among Latinos, not just for climate change, for action on climate change, I mean, but for a whole host of environmental issues, right? And so I think what the answer is, one, to be really intentional about it. And there's been a couple references to what we're doing at Conservation Colorado, and I'll just do a quick minute on it. But in partnership with LCV, I should say, we've launched a project called Protégete, which is now 2.5 years old, which we've made a real commitment to. And we're talking 7 or 8 staff at Conservation Colorado who are organizing in the Latino community, and talking with folks both about local issues, because I think that's been one of our problems, is that we go in and say, this is our agenda, this is what we want to do, it's a really big problem, sign up with us, right? And that actually isn't a terrible idea, but it only gets us so far. So to make sure we're having conversations rooted in those communities is one. 2, that we have ladders of engagement. We have ways to really invest them in the organization, which I think is part of your question. Well, what do we do? Well, we have actually concrete action steps. Just like any other good organizing. I mean, it's no different than any of the other organizing that we do, right? The simple ask to the more complicated ask to ultimately the big, much more, sophisticated ask of a volunteer or a staff person, right? So it's moving them up those ladders of engagement and then making sure they're at the decision-making tables. So what I didn't say when I talked about Colorado, if we flip this Senate seat that I talked about in Jefferson County, and I should have said our candidate's name. It's Rachel Zenzinger, and if you don't know her, you should get to know her. You should go to her website and support her and become engaged. But if Rachel Zenzinger wins that race and pro-environment champs run the state Senate, Lucia Guzman, who's a Latina, is going to be the Senate president here in Colorado. And on the House side, the Speaker of the State House is going to be Crisanta Duran, who's the current majority leader. Again, I'm talking about the state house now, right? So we're going to have 2 Latinas for the first time in the history of Colorado in the 2 most powerful elected positions in the state, save the governor's office. And you want to know something? Those folks are hugely, yes, that's a big deal, and they are huge pro-environment champs. They're 99 and 100 on our scorecard, and they love working on these issues because we're bringing their constituents and their supporters to the table to be a part of the conversation. So I could go on and on. There's a lot of hands. I want to stop there and more later. John, I saw Mike over here, and then we'll make sure we bring on others.
So I guess I just want to keep you on this conversation a little bit because I think it's critical. Gene, you talked about young people and Latinos and their support for environment. Pete, you've kind of expounded on that a little bit. And yet young people and Latinos are much less likely to vote than the general public. So what will you do differently that will help spur young people and Latinos to vote in greater numbers in this election cycle?
It's a really important question. So there's 2 parts. One is they're also less registered than the larger population. So both here in Colorado and nationally, we're investing more money than ever before to actually make sure people are registered, starting back in the spring, summer, down to the deadlines. Each state is different. So actually, a focused effort on registration is number one. Number two is you got to speak to people on issues they care about, and that's why for young people, making sure that the conversation is in part about climate change is a key part of that. And number three, you have to get the candidates, not just the outside groups, but the candidates to do that same thing. And then there will be, I'm pretty confident, the most sophisticated national turnout operation, coordinated with the national parties and the state candidates, that will with intention, focus on Latinos, African Americans, young people, unmarried women. And again, not just saying we need to vote, but here's what's at stake, and use the issues that matter most for them. So make sure they're registered, as outside groups speak to the issues, and make sure the candidates themselves speak. But it's got to be intentional. Just like the same thing about Latinos. Pete has a staff meeting. He's got 20% Latino staff. So do we, because it's intentionality and investment in that effort and another effort. It's just got to be intentional. I got one more. I'm going to let Chip, because he helps run this joint, get the last question. Let's take one in the back, and then we'll go to Chip. 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes, so we got to be fast.
We'll be super
fast. Is this on?
Yes, you're good.
Sorry. Okay, just really quick. I'd love for you both to comment on the fact that one of the reasons that we've seen literally thousands and thousands of Americans out on the Bernie Sanders campaign trail with him is something that we can't ignore. And what is that? And there's a lot of things that could be said, but in this context, they have really addressed something that young people and a lot of people are interested in, which is intersectionality of these movements. They're connecting Black Lives Matter with the climate movement. They're connecting all these different movements together for social justice and environmental justice. They're going into communities and understanding that frontline communities really need to have their issues addressed, such as environmental racism and people who are living on the front lines of these pipelines and infrastructure. And so again, it is about listening to people in these communities, but also tapping into the fact that what they're calling for when you put it all together is systemic change. They're really, this whole issue around the 99% and the 1% is very, very real. And how is the campaign really going to address these issues? Because that's what young people and a lot of people are really trying to address.
Well, you said it. So you said perfectly what Bernie's done incredibly well. So I think captures it very well. And with a big frame and a big cross-cutting agenda and speaking powerfully. Plus, most of those folks know that Washington's broken. So that's also we got to do something radically different to make it happen. And I think honestly, for the fall and as we go the next 5 months, it's a challenge as to how the Clinton campaign, actually working with the Sanders campaign, there's no doubt they're going to work together in my mind. It's just a question of how and when and how they best do that. But they've got to work together to say it's not just about November 8th, it's about that longer vision and that longer agenda. And we have to hear all the candidates talk more about that connected agenda. I think that's critical to make it work.
I would just say, if you don't know Reverend Lennox Yearwood from the Hip Hop Caucus, get to know him. He was our speaker at a dinner a couple weeks ago. We had 700 people in the audience talking about exactly what you said, and I think that's what we need to do, is to listen, learn, and we're going to have a lot more effective. We're going to be a lot more effective at moving folks if we do that. I know. Quick comment there. Did you have a quick comment? Okay, the boss goes first.
So, Colorado is a purple state. And we're fiercely independent, and there's more independents registered in this state than Democrats or Republicans, as you all know. And we're also big on renewables, but we're also big on minerals. So, and it's a swing state. And so I think it's critical, Pete, for you, and Gene, for you on a national basis, to talk about how are you going to get the independents of the United States to vote the environmental ticket, and what are you doing at LCV and environment, in your organization, Pete, to engage those of us who really are going to be one of the determining factors, along with the millennials, and I appreciate the last comment. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the down ticket and how are you approaching that piece?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think from a down ticket perspective here in Colorado, what Conservation Colorado and our allies will do is to make sure that people understand that the choices that they're making down ticket and what the choices that independents are making matter. And Gene said we keep score. This is our state scorecard. We do keep score. And I think we have to explain and do a better and better job of explaining when we have electoral outcomes, things like more jobs in the wind. Vestas comes to town and they hire more and more people when we win down ticket races rather than less. We see more solar companies, small solar companies, come to town, and medium and big solar companies, I might add, and they hire people, and that means more jobs. We have to do a better job of relating that those choices, the down ticket choices, have real live impacts in people's pocketbooks in the state's economy.
So I'm mindful of time, and so I'm going to respect that. And Pete and I will be around, so plenty of continuous conversation. Just a final closing comment.
Yes. So I don't know if you were here this morning,
I wasn't.
but the world's leading solar architect is my business partner, and I am Chilena. And one of the reasons Latinos understand this so well is because we actually have had challenges our whole lives. Nobody really leaves a light on and the lights go off and go on. So we know what it is like. We know what it is like not to have water. So that is already something in our hearts. And I just wanted to say that when I was in the most successful Black group, 1,300 of the most amazing people, they cut it down from 8,000 to 1,300. There was not one conversation about the environment, not one, the whole time for 5 days. So I have volunteered to speak there next year, and they're gonna allow me to do it. So what we have to do is we have to really go to we have to volunteer, and we have to find other Latinos that will be, I am a leader in that industry now,
Great.
and I promise you that I will bring as many as I can along to the game.
That's a
great.
perfect
Thank
comment
you.
to close. We need more volunteers at all levels to help cases. Thank you very much. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, guys.